1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7 through verse 8. Let's read these verses together. Who at any time serves as a soldier at his own expense, who plants a vineyard and does not eat the fruit of it, or who tends a flock and does not use the milk of the flock. I am not speaking these things according to human judgment, am I? Or does not the law also say these things? I want you to turn to the person who is nearest you, who raised their hands earlier to acknowledge that they have served our country in military service. And I want you to shout to them, thank you, for your service. Amen. You may be seated in the Lord's presence. That's what I want to talk about this morning. Thank you for your service. There are 5 primary branches of armed military service. There is the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard. We also have reserves. We have National Guard. And how thoughtful and appropriate it is for both our country and our church to take time out, at least on an annual basis, to celebrate them and the years of service that they have provided. So what I'd like to do this morning is to preach and pray. I want to offer prayers on behalf of those who have served our country valiantly and thoughtfully. I find my basis in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. It is in this particular book of the Bible where the Apostle Paul, along with his ministry partner Barnabas, make the case that they are soldiers in the army of the Lord. And the point that they drive home is that there were those who had crept into the church at Corinth, and they were saying to Paul and Barnabas that you all cannot be true disciples and apostles of Jesus Christ because you do not behave as the other apostles behaved. Can I share something with you parenthetically? There is nothing wrong with people trying to draw a box and put you in it as long as you stay out of it. See, it doesn't bother me a bit when people say things to me like, if you were a Christian, you would do thus and such, especially when they ain't never read the Bible. When people say to me, if you're a pastor, you ought to do thus and so. Well, the problem is not when you don't know my job. The problem is when I don't know my job. And when you find yourself jumping for any and everybody or jumping for any and everything, you can lose yourself in the process. You need to learn what God has called you into and how he desires for you to behave. So what you'll find in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 is that Paul and Barnabas did not exist in the same fashion that the other apostles existed. They were able to work outside of the church as a means of bringing in income because they saw their ministry different from those who were around them. And it is couched within the verses of this text that Paul, speaking on behalf of himself and Barnabas, draws the conclusion in verse 7. Who at any time serves as a soldier at his own expense. That births for us at least 3 areas of prayer that I want to share, not only on behalf of those who have served our country faithfully and valiantly, but perhaps even for others in this room who are considering military service. Here's the first prayer that I believe is birthed out of this text. It's in verse 7 down through verse 10. And it is this. This is my prayer for you this morning. I pray that you've received everything that you deserved. I pray that you receive everything that you deserved. The very notion that some of us step out from among us and place ourselves in harm's way on behalf of God and country is to be commended. Look at what you find in verse 7 down through verse 10. Paul says, who at any time serves as a soldier at his own expense. What he's saying is that soldiers who are willing to soldier deserve everything that they get. And something is wrong when you want people to do something on your behalf, but you don't want to participate. There's a colleague of mine in another city who is struggling with volunteers in his church to serve in the area of children's ministry. And the struggle that he is dealing with is this. Everybody wants somebody to watch their children. They just don't want to help watch other people's children. They want to drop theirs off and leave, but sometimes they never want to stay themselves. Paul says when it comes to service, that when there are those who are willing to serve, they do not serve at their own expense. There are things that they deserve. And I want to pray for you that for those of you who are currently out of military service, I pray that when you look back on how this government and country have treated you during your years of service and since your years of service, I pray that you have received everything that you deserve. But Pastor Thorpe, why are you so emphatic about praying in that direction? Because I believe you deserve something, watch this, for your willingness to sacrifice. Your willingness to sacrifice. The fact that when you took the oath of military service, you were agreeing that if your country called on you to put yourself in harm's way, you were willing to make the sacrifice. Not only do I pray you've received all that you deserve because of your willingness to sacrifice, but also because of your family's steadfastness. Which means not only did you serve, but your family had to do time right alongside of it. Those days, those weeks, those months, those years when you may have been separated from your families, as you were doing your time, they were doing their time. And I want to congratulate you. I want to thank you. And I pray that when you look back on it, everything you deserve, you receive. Not only because of your willingness to sacrifice, not only because of your family's steadfastness, but for the ultimate sacrifice. There are those in this room who have been in actual combat zones where they face the threat and reality of being wounded, or perhaps even ultimately perishing in an area of conflict. I want you to think about that. They put themselves in harm's way. That's a sacrifice. As they served, their families served along with them, not only dealing with the time that they were away from home, but the family having to wrestle with whether or not they would come back safely. They were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. And I pray that because of your willingness to do all of that on behalf of us, I pray that this country has given you everything that you deserve. Which means you never have to sit in a corner and eat peanuts. You should walk proudly when you think about the uniform that you wore. When you think about the level and quality of service that you gave. You should be able to hold your head up high. Thankful that you were willing to place God and country ahead of your own level of human sacrifice. And I pray that whatever you deserve, you got it. That's not all. There's a second prayer that I believe is birthed out of this text. Not only do I pray that you've received everything that you deserve, I pray, watch this, that you've received everything that you desired. Because I've talked to many in military service. My oldest brother retired after 23 years and 6 months in the Air Force, and you should see how he makes a bed. Oh, my Lord. Often we stay in the same room in my parents' home. He'll stay in there first, and then I'll come and stay in there, and I'm always intimidated. I hate to unmake the bed when I see how he has made the bed. All those corners are so sharp and crisp. There's a certain way he folds the pillowcase, and I should take a picture of it so I know how to put it back like he did it. You should see me with my preacher self trying to refold stuff the way he folded stuff. And in my communication with people who have served our country valiantly and steadfastly, many of them not only entered into military service for the sake of serving God and country, but they entered military service as a field of employment. And here's the whole point that I'm making. Serving in our nation's armed services ought to be a noble aspiration. You know why that is so important? Is because as a country, now we've got to be careful. Many of us grew up in an environment where we looked up to people who served in the military. I am that way even to this day. When I see perfect strangers in their military uniform, I stop them. If we're in Walmart, Burger King, doesn't matter. And I stop them and say to them, thank you for your service. It ought to be a noble aspiration. When someone says, I am going to put myself in harm's way on behalf of God and country. But here is a consequence that creates. For our country, whenever we take military action or change military policy, we have got to make certain that it is always in the best interest of the common good. Which means when men and women are pledging their service to this country, before we send them into harm's way, we've got to make certain that we're doing more than keeping campaign promises. We've got to make certain that as a country, that we so respect our men and women in uniform that before we make decisions that could harm them and harm their families, we should make certain that we are doing what is right and doing it on behalf of the common good. I was researching this week the oath that military officers take. Those oaths vary some from one branch of military service to the other, but essentially they all begin the same and they end the same. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And it ends with, so help me God. And somebody is wondering, Pastor Thorpe, they have sworn or confirmed an oath not to the Bible, but to the Constitution. But as quietly as it is kept, even though our Constitution was ratified by human men who at their inception were deeply flawed, yet through amendments, we have reached a document that is so worthy of allegiance until we take our men and women and put them in harm's way based on an oath they made to uphold that same document. Let that settle in. Because a lot of us know the Desperate Housewives of Williston, but we hadn't paused for the 30 minutes it would take, if that, to peruse the entire Constitution. We see it as some vague document that's hidden somewhere in the Library of Congress, but you've already pulled up what's going to happen on the January episode of Power. So you can pause to peruse the Constitution. Dr. Nigel Cameron, that I have had the privilege of meeting, he is the president of the Center for Policy and Emerging Technologies in Washington, D.C. He is also a theologian. When he was presenting at the Cade Museum, where I have the privilege of serving on the board of directors, one of the things that he pointed out that had never dawned on me, that one of the most prolific constitutional defenders was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Reverend Dr. Gardner Calvin Taylor has often said of Dr. King, who not only preached the gospel and pushed civil rights and civil justice, he also spoke against what he felt was the unjustness of the Vietnam War. Dr. Taylor postulated that perhaps if Dr. King had been more quiet on the war, he would have lived longer. But he was so concerned about our men and women and the oath that he had taken until Dr. King was willing to put his own name and reputation on the line to uphold them because of the document that they were upholding. Dr. King was a constitutional scholar. On his last night with us, April 3rd, 1968, as he spoke in Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee, he was there not on a social visit. He was there to assist striking sanitation workers who were fighting for better wages and more equitable treatment. And that night, in what we refer to as his famous mountaintop speech, he addressed the issue of injunctions that had been placed on sanitation workers in Memphis. The local Memphis government said that it was unlawful for the striking sanitation workers to protest on their own behalf. And Dr. King addressed that issue on April 3rd, 1968, as he spoke to a crowd that had been awaiting his address. He turned his attention to the injunction, and these are the words that he said. He said, "We have an injunction, and we're going into court tomorrow morning to fight this illegal, unconstitutional injunction. All we say to America is," and this is the point that I'm trying to make, he said, "all we say to America is, be true to what you said on paper." He said, "If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they hadn't committed themselves to that over there." He said, "But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of the press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is in the right to protest for right. And so I just say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around. Not going to let any injunction turn us around. We are going on." What are you trying to say, Pastor? Never trivialize this country. And I know it's difficult in 2019. If you, like me, have somewhat of an addiction to the 24-hour news cycle, you wonder what America has become. We are at a place we have never been before, where we will have the unmitigated gall to assault the character of men and women who have valiantly fought to defend the rights and freedoms of this country. The point that I'm trying to make is that America owes itself to get back where we came from. Because every day there are men and women on foreign soil and domestic soil who are willing to die for the document that we have upheld. And if they are willing to die for it, the least we can do is hold one another accountable to it. It ought to be a noble profession. So I pray that you not only received everything that you deserved for your military service, I pray that you have received everything that you desire. That the life you desire to help create for your family, the burden you ease of serving God and country, I pray that you have gotten it all. And I pray on behalf of our young people who are thinking about military service. I pray that as a country we would repent and make certain that your service will be held in such high regard until never again can a Purple Heart soldier be castigated from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. May God have mercy on us when we ridicule those who were willing to serve and uphold those who refuse to serve. May God have mercy upon us all. Well, there are two prayers, and then there is a third prayer. I want to pray, finally, that you continue to receive everything that you deserve. One of the things that attorneys often do, because some of y'all are so sweet. Y'all are just wonderful. Y'all sweet. And you get in an accident, you were hurt, and you don't want to sue anybody. And you're so sweet. I love you for that. You so sweet. You said, the Lord's going to take care of me. Okay. All right. That's good. You don't want to sue. Here's one of the things that attorneys often recommend that people understand. That sometimes you need to seek damages not only based on how you feel today, but can I tell you something about these bodies? See, when you're in your teens and your 20s, you go through something, that's it. That's just it that day. You happen to slip and fall, that's it. You might leave a bruise, but that's it. About 24 hours, you back up, good as new. That's it. The older you get, you can hurt some stuff in 85 and still got to go to the doctor for the same thing in 2019, which means you've got to protect yourself from what happened then and for what may happen down the road. And we owe our men and women who have served this country not only to take care of them during their years of service, but based on all that they have exposed themselves to, we ought to be in a position to continue to provide for them whatever they need in connection to the service that they gave. Far too many people I run into who are still wrestling today with the physical, psychological, and emotional ramifications of something that happened decades ago. And may God help us as a country if we can write checks to billionaires and complain about taking care of our men and women who put themselves on the line to protect God and country. I pray that you've received everything that you deserve. I pray that you've received everything that you desire. And then I pray that you continue to receive everything that you deserve. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Reserve, Natural Guard. I pray that you get everything that you desire and deserve. And I might ought to tell you, there's another army that's looking for a few good soldiers. And you don't have to travel to a military base in order to join. All you got to do is put on the uniform. But Pastor, what is the uniform? You got to put on the helmet of salvation. You got to have on the breastplate of righteousness. You got to have on the belt of the truth, the shoes of the gospel, the shield of faith, and the sword of the Spirit. Pastor, you describe the armor that Christian soldiers wear. There is something on their heads. There is something on their chests. There is something around their waist. There is a shield on their arm. There is a sword in their hand. Pastor, they even have shoes on their feet. But I didn't hear you mention one time a piece of armor that covers their back. That's not by accident. That's because in the Christian army, you are always moving forward and never moving backward. And God can't use no coward soldier. If I could hit the rewind button and go back to 1975, the old church would say, I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. And somebody else would shout back, I'm a sanctified soldier. Somebody on the other side would shout, I got my sword and shield in the army of the Lord. And then at the end, somebody says, if I die, let me die in the army of the Lord. God is looking for a few good soldiers who would be willing to put on the uniform and testify to the whole world that can't nobody do me like Jesus. Can't nobody do me like the Lord.